Welcome to the On Main Street podcast, where you'll meet some of the area's leading minds. These community leaders and business owners are ready to share their journeys of success, failures, and what it takes to reach your full potential.
We're your hosts, Brady Lindquist.
And I'm Kelly Baith. In this episode, we had the pleasure of sitting down with Josh Reed and his wife, Christa Otteson from the Goat Ridge Brewery.
Following their passions for beer and cultivating a place for people to come together, Josh and Christa have built a family-friendly, community-driven brewery in the small town of New London.
Here's their story. Christa, let's get started with you. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I was born and raised outside of New London by Sibley State Park, Games Lake. Grew up in farm country, but with all the lakes we have. And graduated just a year ahead of our Kelly Baith. Right. Worked with your dad at the Farmers State Bank.
You did?
Yeah, that was my high school job.
Bank? I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Oh.
I was a teller.
Oh, no way. During high school?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
After school every day.
Okay.
Yeah, and then I found
They're
this
out of
guy.
business now, right? No.
Yeah, they closed.
Yeah.
They lost all their good help, basically. So they had to. They got bought out by Lake Region.
And yeah, so I grew up around here, and Josh grew up not too far away.
Well, so did you move anywhere? Did you go to the cities, or did you go?
After high school, I went out to California and lived in Santa Barbara for a year with my mom's aunt. Okay. And I went to college out there, and then came back to the cities and went to school at Hamlin in St. Paul.
Okay.
And had a little bit too much fun, and then took a break from college for a little while.
So going to college for what? Now I'm jumping in on you, but going to college for what?
I started out going to college for writing, creative writing and English. Okay. And then I eventually wound up switching to sociology.
Okay. So Josh, how about you? Born and raised?
I grew up west of Bruton on a ranch out there, Angus Ranch. So not far from here, but we always referred to New London as New London Coolies over here. All you guys, your high-class sports, and your fancy lakes, and we're sitting around
cut
cow shit and stuff. You know? But yeah, I just grew up west of Bruton, and being a farm kid and doing all that and the whole DIY thing and everything we did, we made it work on the farm, and I'm a couple years ahead of you guys, but once me and Christa eventually hooked up in that Western Stearns County web, I had been out west. I went to school for a while right after high school too to NDSU, and knew that I needed to get west, and there's some other things I needed to figure out before I was ready to figure out what I want to do forever, and I might have figured out. No.
That's good. So you're going to school there for what? What did you go for?
It was, so I went to Fargo, NDSU for a year and a half, and doing some ag stuff and just kind of the generals, and eventually moved back and decided on a whim, winter was coming, I'm moving to Summit County, Colorado, and we're going to go snowboard and figure that out. So I packed up my truck, and next day I took off and living in hostels and working day labor and snowboarding, and doing that whole deal. And did that for a winter, came back and met Christa. And
you actually met me before that.
I did.
And we were at a party together the night before you left for Colorado, and he asked me if I wanted to go with him. And we were not we hardly knew each other at this point. And I totally wanted to, but my parents raised me with the good sense to say no. And so he went to Colorado and I stayed back here. And then we wound up finding each other again later on, going back out to Colorado for a summer and then going out to Oregon.
Yeah, I moved to Denver and spent a summer there and skateboarded and broke my hip and all that good stuff.
Wow.
And then we packed up and went west and needed to go further west and went out to spent some time in the Northwest, ended up on Mount Hood and rode out there and did some fun stuff, and kind of would come back home in the summertime and over Christmas, and, always had this calling back home, but still needed to find our way out there too, and ended up spending a few years in Olympia, Washington, and both of us ended up going back to school, getting our AAs there. Then we went up to Bellingham, north of Seattle, and spent another 3 years up there and finished our school up there, and And
I was
that's
only
kinda
there for
where-
2 years because I finished before him.
Yeah. Yeah.
Were you going for your PhD or something? What took so long?
In snowboarding.
I shouldn't talk. No.
Let's start with the beer.
How it started, yeah.
Yeah. What got you interested in beer?
Well, I guess in the late or in the early '90s, there wasn't much beer. Even most of the '90s around here, there was anything different than your Bushmiller Coors, and once I was the drinking age, right?
Yeah.
We were looking out, and there was Summit, and that was a big beer, and that's kind of one of those that's paved the way for Minnesota breweries, and in just the, what they're offering, this hoppy beer that there wasn't around at that time, So anything different was interesting, And once we started traveling, the first stop was Colorado, and the beer scene was kind of blowing up there, and just what you'd see at these brew pubs in Breckenridge, and it involved people in this positive thing, and the big windows, and looking at the ski resort, and people doing recreating, and sharing a beer afterwards, and seeing this music in the corner, afterwards. So it was like outdoor rec, and it was music, and it was beer, and it was a social thing,
Good atmosphere, right?
Yeah, and it was positive, and it wasn't, you think of your old dirty bar sitting there and tearing my beer type thing, So there was like a positive, and
Like a culture
a bright
was
culture.
healthier
Yeah,
and
right.
and more community focused.
that was around that. And that's just, as we went further west, and that was kind of that time of the last big beer wave or beer revolution, and all these microbreweries that are huge now, Rogue and Sierra Nevada, and there's a lot of brew pubs popping up. So we just kind of, that was a little hub. If you go to a place and there's a brew pub or a brewery, you check that out, and it kind of just fit with the culture of what we were doing and the people we were around. And when we lived in Olympia, I worked for a guy, and he is one of those guys that went all out on his hobbies, and he was a home brewer and had this huge setup, so I started home brewing with him in like '96, and then we continued to move around, and we weren't one location for that long a period, but I was sporadically home brewing as we went along.
We constantly had carboys, the vessels that he brews in, like every kitchen. There were always like these giant vessels full of beer that was fermenting, draped in his like t-shirts to keep it warm or whatever. So yeah, there's been beer in our kitchen for
You probably love
decades.
That,
Yeah, loved it.
It's like a pet,
Do you still have some of
Talking to
those
you
today
every
at home or not?
No, I don't have time.
So that's where this
It's on
whole
a
thing
bigger
started.
scale.
You wanted to get it out of the kitchen, so you're like, you gotta
you go.
start something.
Pretty much.
Yes, it kind of did. Yeah. So eventually, once we moved back to this area, and over those years of traveling, and we started growing hops when we moved back to. We had a farm place that the old timers Norwegians call Rugen, which is am I saying that right?
Goat's Back or Goat's Ridge.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's north of Games Lake, and that was in her family since the 1870s.
Okay.
Very
So we
cool.
moved back there the first time, and I'm gonna, the Midwest, the whole brew thing was starting up here again, and the Surly Bill was passed, and right about that point, they made it possible to have a production brewery where you could sell your own product there, so you could make it as a little guy, So I'm like, I just got to get my finger in this industry, and I like to grow stuff, and we did a lot of gardening, grew up on a ranch, and Chris always said I had a little nurturing aspect to myself, so that helps. And so we planted a bunch of hops, and we grew hops for a few years, sold them to some home brewers, and Indeed Brewing in Minneapolis took them for their first Minnesota Fresh Hop Ale. And then we were like, well, God, New London's starting to pop here, there's Main Street's happening, it's that river, people are starting to notice it, and if we're going to stay here, we want to be a part of this community, and we want to contribute, and we want to make it a place that we want to hang out, and we want our kids to, and we want our kids involved, and them to be known and be a part of that. And so we found this little building on the river, and the brew thing was still a little bit of a dream, but Christa is a little more forward thinking than I am, and we found that spot that we're at now, and bought that building, and she did a lot of arts and DIY crafts out of there, and had classes and community things, and we rented out some studio space, and until we got that plan together to put that brewery in effect. So
When was that? When did you buy that?
It was probably about 8 years ago. Was it around 8 years ago?
Okay.
And it was the pottery workshop before that
Yeah,
that Glenn and
right,
Julie Joplin
right.
had. And I actually took a pottery class from Bill Gossman in that space.
Yeah.
And I remember sitting at the pottery wheel talking to Bill, and I said that my husband was a home brewer and that we'd love to open a microbrewery. And Bill just stopped and looked at me, and he was like, "That would make my dreams come true." Bill's our mayor in New London. But yeah, so I think we knew that spot was a really special spot. And I think, well, actually, the first time I went in there, I walked in during water days, and it was a pottery workshop. And I was with my daughter, and I was looking for a cool, quiet place to get out of the sun on a hot summer day. And we walked into the pottery workshop, and it was so peaceful, and you could see the river through the windows into the backyard, and the shade. And I didn't even know that building was really there. I'd never really noticed the river back there,
Sure,
growing up around New London. It just wasn't really a part of the landscape for me. And so it was kind of like this really special little place. And yeah, so when Glenn and Julie decided to sell it, we bought it from them, not knowing for sure what we would do, but we always knew that New London would be a good place to start a business, be a great place to do something like a brewery. And the stars kind of aligned. Josh was working as a administrator for a watershed district out of Bruton, his hometown, before he started the brewery. And we kind of came to a crossroads, and his office work isn't Josh's favorite. And so
when
we
you're
just
dealing
kinda,
with water issues, I always tell people working in that industry, water quality and quantity, no matter what you do, what decision you make, someone's going to be a little
Not
PO'd
happy.
at you, whatever side of the fence you're on. But if you take that water and you turn it into beer, hey, dude, you're all good.
Everybody's happy. Any kind of bumps in the road? Was it tough to get? I mean, you had to get a liquor license for town, right?
Yeah.
Any challenges that you want to kind of share?
I guess once we decide we're going to do the brew house, and that, I said, yeah, we got to make this change. And she said, figure it out and let's do this, and thank you for supporting, and she's been a huge part of all this. But once we decided to make it happen, there's a lot of federal hoops you got to jump through the TTB, the Tobacco and Trade Bureau.
Okay.
So that was, a big obstacle. Obviously, we were on a very small budget, and it was just trying to scrape together everything we had to get enough funds. You think of building a brewery and the size and scale of that. So we were at a very small scale. We were a nano brewery, 3 barrels or less, and a barrel is like 31 and a half gallons. We're really doing, 80-gallon batches. So we scraped together what we could to just make this happen. And we didn't, a lot of people thought, you're crazy. You're never going to sell 400 beers a week and pay your bills out of New London, a town of 1,200 people, But the obstacles that the federal paperwork, it took a lot of time. It took about 5 months to get through that process, and you got a stack that's 4 inches high, and water quality concerns, where you got your money from. A lot of these laws that are in effect, federal and state, are totally archaic. They're from right after Prohibition, from the 40s, and so there hasn't been a lot of change in those laws. And then through the state, you're going through the alcohol and gambling, public safety, Department of Ag, and then on your local level, you're going through your city and your county, and there's a list of 5-6 pieces of paper on our wall, those licenses we have to take care of every year, and a lot of regular reporting through those agencies too. So just once you figure out what you got to do, well, this is what we got to do to make this happen, and you take care of it. But yeah, it's a process to sort out. And there wasn't many, the breweries are just starting to pop in the city. There wasn't many out this side, so it was, the brewery world is pretty collaborative and open, and to helping people out. So we knew a couple breweries in Minneapolis we'd work with. They gave us, some pointers and about this. But, we just doing it on a very small scale and in a rural area, we kind of had to figure out how we're going to make this work and if it was going to work,
So facing those challenges, that's what we want our listeners to do is, so people said, yeah, you're maybe crazy. This is so small. You're scraping everything together. I mean, what did you mentally, what got you through it? How did you keep going forward? What were your conversations like? Like, we can do this. Anybody else, any outside support coming in to help, or what kind of got you through to kind of keep pushing forward?
Well, I have to say, I maybe thought it was a little crazy too, and I wasn't sure that this kind of business could be sustained in our little town, but Josh was. And I think we moved back home. We moved back to New London so that we could have the life we wanted and not, work in jobs that we didn't want to work in and just have kind of a hectic pace. And so if we knew that if we were going to be here, we needed to take advantage of the opportunities that are presented when you live in a small town full of really great people. So I don't know. That's why I encouraged Josh to do it, not because I was really confident that this was all going to work out just great in the end. But I don't know. I feel like New London is a great place to take a gamble.
Yeah, I like that.
And it really paid off for us.
Yeah, and I think being, a community that we have ties to, I grew up 30 miles from here, but it's pretty close, and she's got ties here, and we got family and a lot of good people, and there's so much community support when they heard that we were trying to do this, People on Main Street like you guys and in other businesses, the city, everyone was just bending over backwards to help us and just to support us and spread the word. We were pretty, trying to think of the word, we were really intentional about involving the community and letting them know what was happening, and trying to let them in that and take some ownership of that. Like I said, we didn't have a lot of resources, but there's a lot of hands, that came through our family and friends. And, we made a lot of new friends that are tight with us now, our carpenter buddy, Wes, that, just doing whatever it took to make things happen and pull it together, last minute when we're, if I could start a brewery again, I'd be pretty damn good and efficient at it. But that first time with everything, you're learning
as you go.
But I think it just was, I couldn't have pulled this off in South Minneapolis. I didn't have the resources, the structure around to help us pull through that, or out west, But here, this is our community, and so they really kind of got us through it and got us going. So we appreciate that more.
Yeah, a lot of faith and trust in the people around. Sometimes you got to bank on that kind of stuff and just hope that it's there. I think a lot of people don't do that. They're just too hesitant and too scared or nervous to take that kind of step. But that's neat that you guys were able to do that and see a lot of people come together.
Like Christa said, it was time to do something, and we weren't going to stick around here, and want to show our kids that you can take chances, and you can, if you're confident in what you're doing and you treat people well, people are going to back you up, and things will work out for you, and you have the right to be happy in what you're doing and not have a job that you kind of grit your teeth every day to go to, even if it's takes a lot and it's a lot of stress on relationships and family, but you get to a point, if you put all you got into it and you put your trust in that, so you want to be example for your kids too. You can do what you want to do, and you deserve to be happy what you're doing, and
choose something you love, passionate about.
So that's what kept us going, I guess.
That's good.
So a lot of your beers, it seems like they're music based. A lot of the names. Is that true?
There's a few of them in there. Not many people get them. Every once in a while, I'll go to these beer shows in the city, and someone's like, "Oh, killer sleep reference, dude. Like, and everyone's like, sleep, who's that?
Yeah.
Some crazy.
Sleep is a band? Yeah. Is that right, Josh?
That's true.
Okay.
That's true. Yeah, there is a link through, some of our beer names and I guess, the stories, to make things authentic and true and something that people dig, you got to tell your story and they can take it or leave it,
Yeah.
So the name of our place, the Goat Ridge, was the farm place that was in her family forever. That's part of our story, and in our place, we pieced it together, and there's remnants in there from wheel hubs we pulled out of the grove at the farm that our buddy made into a table, and there's the punk rock posters on the wall that we've had in our basement and traveled with over the years, and there's a little bit of a story to everything around there, and the beers are a story too, and I guess some of those names are, some indicate place names from this area, some are off of some bands or music or ideas I had, and this would make sense, or this tastes like that song. It seems crazy to people. I was just gonna say in the music thing too, that's something that we've kind of been a big thing at our shop is bringing live original music to this town. And when we opened this up, that's something that was near and dear to what we wanted to do, with the beer and introduce these different artists, and so that's something we've been doing every couple weeks at least, since we've been open, and we do some music residencies now and some little more local artists, get them in there once a week for a month and getting exposure. People to really get to know their music, and that's been fun. It's been a big draw too,
Well, and I can say that I've been surprised by our little town. And, obviously people who come to the brewery aren't just from New London, so it's surrounding folks too. But I feel like there is such an appetite around here to be surprised. People want to consume beer and food and music and other kinds of culture that they haven't encountered before. And I don't think that is how folks think about small town people, Mm-hmm. And I think the brewery has demonstrated that to us and to me as someone who grew up here. I've been continually amazed at how people show up for bands they've never heard of. People like our daughter's kindergarten teacher, Mrs. Bankston, comes out for live music all the time and just loves it. And it's music that I would think so many people maybe have never really listened to or might not listen to any place other than like at the brewery or when they come to see live music other places.
I think that's the environment you guys have made there has kind of really made it easy for people to do that.
Well, I think there's something magic happening with the synergy with different kinds of people who wouldn't maybe otherwise gather. It seems like in that space, I don't know if it's the outdoor space that kind of just draws everyone, but people who wouldn't otherwise rub shoulders they know each other now, and there are all these connections that have been made in that space, and I'm sure in many other spaces too. But it almost feels like we were waiting to have just like another community gathering space for conversations that maybe weren't happening other places. And We've gotten to know so many people since opening the brewery, and people who maybe didn't really go out and about because they didn't maybe feel like there was a space that felt like home for them.
Sure.
So, and there are just really cool things that people have kind of like owned that space. I mean, since we opened, people bring gifts to the brewery and like make stuff, and we'll leave it at the brewery as decorations and
water our plants.
Thanks,
Carol.
Hey, shout out to Carol.
And the beer choir, like we have to talk about beer choir because that's amazing. And that's Brian and Sherry Pearson, our music and band teachers from high school in New London Spicer. And it seems like people in our little community love to get together, love to gather. There's tons of creativity pulsing through the veins of our community. And yeah, people are really happy to bring that and to share that in different ways. Well, and Mrs. Novak, the art teacher at our elementary school, has been doing a music residency with her husband and a friend of theirs. They'll be playing tonight. But it's Pit of Fashion is their like 3-piece band. Cool. Bethany Lacterin and Yais Gossman really kind of met at the brewery, I think. Bethany had just moved back and she started working at the brewery, and now they're married, they're artists. They've done a bunch of really weird and wonderful things at the brewery. Bethany has done sound, and she's, had different roles at the brewery.
Yeah, we've had a wedding there. We've had a funeral. You've made a casket or upholstered
a casket right next to the cooler before we had done the addition.
Wow. I'm sure there's some not so cool. No, but no, everyone's like super respectful to each other there. That thing that Chris brought up is huge. People always say that. Well, I would have never. There's no TV in there, and people always say, well, that's great. People talk to each other that wouldn't. And you have 20-somethings talking to 70-year-olds from different towns that are coming through here, and it's just a nice positive mix, and it's a place where, we got young kids, and you do too, and a place where kids can run around too, and people don't have a problem with that, and they can have a root beer, and we try to, keep that open and positive as we can for everyone,
right?
Yeah, and it's not a place to get, really drunk. It's like it's a healthy, positive space. And since we opened it, it's been really important to us that it's a place where our kids belong and everyone else's kids too. And, we want grandmas to feel at home there just as much as like Josh and his punk rock music. So I think,
my grandma's 96, and every time she comes, she's, we have to go to the brewery.
And she wears her Goat Ridge t-shirt everywhere. She lives up in Fargo. Okay. Shout out to Grandma Alice.
It is a special place, not just because you're sitting here, but I think you've got a combination of things that really does draw a lot of different people there. And I just think of one that we drove our golf cart down for Rib Fest.
Oh, yeah.
Tell us about Rib Fest, what that was like, and explain that day.
Well, Rib Fest is a fundraiser for our local nonprofit organization, The Link. That's a faith-based organization. All the area churches kind of pulled together to fund this organization that's actually run by my cousin Rhonda Otteson, and they've built this amazing fundraiser. And this past summer, they held it at the brewery and in the parking lot across the street from the brewery. And we had, I don't know how many. There are a bunch of different rib teams. The teams make ribs and compete for the prize of the best ribs. And so there were, I think, maybe like 12 different teams, all with like a serving tent. I don't even know how many people were there.
Yeah, I think there was probably close to 1,000. It was, I think, one of their bigger days, and it was a beautiful day. We had beer choir played, and we have a kind of open pick'em circle on Sundays that people come in. They played first, and then we had another band that played. So it was music and ribs and pie and beer and root beer and
homemade pie. People donate pie.
Yeah.
And it's a super fun day. And I mean, I saw all kinds of people, like everyone from all walks of life shows up to that event. And it's pretty cool. They raised a lot of money. They do it every year. It's a great event.
I think no matter what you do, like if you're doing an event like that, or you're us, or what you guys are in business with, you can't be comfortable and do the same thing time after time, year after year. You always got to keep moving and do a little reinvention and add in whatever that is with your brand or your look or your space or whatever.
Start doing podcasts.
Yeah, podcasts. See, you guys are
do it in the fishbowl in our office in Spicer. So what else? What's on the horizon? Anything? You probably don't want to spill the beans about anything super fantastic, but what else?
New stuff. Like you said, we're always trying to mix it up and new things. Like Christa said, I guess every year we'll be 4 years old in April. And every year we've added a little something. We've expanded our brew house. We've doubled the size of our tap room, built that kitchen. There's always been something, and it gets tired after a while too, but you try to keep moving forward. No major expansions. I guess we'll have to build up if we're going to build it all anymore. So nothing major expansions planned in the near future. But we always got new beers coming out, seasonal things. We added a bunch more taps and extended our bar this winter. Today, I think we got 15, 16 beers on tap. It's all made in-house. We're going to be expanding our non-alcoholic line. We got local craft, I say Minneapolis, kombucha maker. So we got kombucha on tap now, and we're going to do some more sodas just so there's more options for families, kids, people that aren't drinking. We have the new Berliner Weiss that's on tap, low ABV. A lot of those people that are wine drinkers, we're trying to introduce some lighter, lower alcohol beers to appease some of those other folks too. Always some new bands coming through. We got always a few different cool different genres, trying to mix things up. So there's always some new music happening, and there might be something little fresh come fall or winter. So
sweet.
We might we'll always have a little something up our sleeve. So stay tuned.
We're trying to give our friend Wes a little break off the construction rotation that he's been on. Wes Luagi. Shout out to Wes.
Yeah, if you're
best carpenter
Wes.
ever.
Good work.
Really like a personal philosophy. It seems like you're DIY, just doing your own thing, creating your own path. Kind of go into that a little bit and how that's helped your business.
Yeah, I think it's growing up in this area, like you guys have too, growing up on a ranch or farm or just in a rural area, and in the times we did when we didn't probably have as much as our kids do, so you kind of made do with what you had. You figured it out, and so that's just kind of how we do it and how we go about everything. You can't do it without help either, but yeah, everything we did, kind of new things, the building, the construction of the building, the decorating, that's all Christa, kind of the vision of how that place looks. That's all what she's came up with, and we've tried to contribute in ideas between me, her, and Wes, and other people, and I think it's tough sometimes because, like I said, it's hard. The first time you do something is the hardest. And you're trying to figure that out as you go. When we do this again in our next life, we'll have her down pat. But so it is tough at times, and maybe not the most efficient. But I guess if that's your framework and your mindset, that you figure it out and you make do with what you have and you do the best you can. You figure out how to make these things happen, and it's a learning experience. And I think when it comes down to it in your final product, there's something more true and authentic to it that comes through. You don't have to tell people that. You somehow see it when you come through our door, or hopefully when you talk to us too. So I think that's something that I believe in, and sure. I think being able to tell your story and the truth and doing it yourself, it's something to it,
Yeah, there's doing it yourself, and then there's doing it together.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the things we've learned is in a small town, you're so much better off if you capitalize on community and you take that doing it together approach, even as you set out to accomplish something that's your own dream, I think man, I just think of how different this experience would have been if we were in a bigger city, and just how much harder it would have been to find our audience, to find our community of people to come in the door, and even navigating some of those early hurdles. We've had a lot of support, and there have been, friends and sort of participants who have been along for the ride at different stages. Kelly Ash was Josh's partner when the brewery started, and Kelly moved on to other things. We've had amazing people helping us out in the tap room, including our great friend Nicole, who moved out from the cities to manage the tap room, and Kyle Jarius, who's in the back helping Josh. Awesome beer tenders. We've been really lucky to have amazing people in that space with us. And I'm probably forgetting some folks, but our families have also been super supportive and cheering for us. And Josh's dad wears his Goat Ridge t-shirt wherever he goes to. But
That's an awesome story. It's a combination of helping hands and your passion just for what you're doing, and just kind of trusting in the community. And that was pretty similar to Jesse's story at Bowling at the
Alley on Ash
too. Just really kind of trusting in the community. And
I think when you involve them like that and they're helping along the way, and then people take ownership in it, and like Christa said, and it is, we obviously, you say DIY, but it's more of a small town ethic, obviously it wasn't. Yeah. There's a lot of people that made this happen. They do take ownership in that, and it wouldn't happen without them and you guys and the whole community. So we, it's a different place now than it was. I think we still have the same feel and the same ethics as it was 4 years ago, and it's just a little bit bigger, but it feels the same, and the same people are there, and it feels like they're home too. So thank you to everyone that's supported us too.
Yeah.
What piece of advice, you've touched on a lot of different things, but what piece of advice would you give to any listener that's thinking about maybe opening their own business, trying to take the next step in their company or whatever it might be, that's just maybe on the edge of their seat, just thinking or wanting to do it? Any tip or piece of advice that you would share with them?
Tell someone what you want to do and ask people who have done it. Because I think, New London in particular, and probably many small towns, people really want to see other folks thrive. And so you can learn a lot from other people who have started something themselves, whether it's a similar business or something totally different.
Get a 9 to 5 or have your nights and weekends off.
Yeah. That's what I thought real estate was.
Yeah.
Didn't know that when I signed up.
No, I agree with Christa. You just got to be doing what you want to do if you love it, and this, it's got to be your hobby and your job. A lot of what we do in our job identifies who we are too. So you got to love what you're doing and appreciate the people you're working with and around, and I think just reaching out and gaining experience from that community that's around you. You already have the support, and it doesn't matter the type of business. But
yeah, that's good. That's good.
Have a wife that's very understanding.
You guys are great. Your kids are great too.
Sure. Yeah, they're all right.
Yeah.
A question a lot of people ask, like, what is this all about? How did you start out? Like, where did the desire come from?
Well, I'm going to jump in and answer that, because as an observer of Josh for 20 some years, I can say that he likes to tend to things that are alive. So he used to, in a former life, he worked for a prairie restorations company. He likes plants, he likes animals, and he likes to drink beer. So I think he's an experimenter, and when he started making beer, it was something that he could do that was really creative, but also practical, because it's something you can consume. And I actually think it's been a way for this introvert to connect with people.
Oh.
Do you think that's true?
Yeah, I don't know. I can talk about myself.
Yeah.
No, I think beer does help bring
part of that.
And beer does sitting down and having a conversation on a long table with a bunch of different people. It spurs conversation, and it's a relaxed environment. And like you said, it's something you've created. It's a little bit art, a little bit of science, and it's a live product, and you had to tend to it, and you had to figure out what that environment was perfect to make that yeast eat those right amount of sugars and those types of sugars that you brought out from that specific type of malt, and right aromas from those hops, and And it's something, when you do something that you love, you want to be proud of that product. And if you can bring it to people and you can share that, and you know what you're talking about, that's something fun to share. And when people are excited about it too, it's, yeah.
How about let's talk about social media, or how can they find you, or where are you guys at?
Yeah, obviously it's the regular spots, Instagram and Facebook, and goatridgebrewing.com. And we say we have a lot of events happening all the time, every month. Updates are on there all the time, new beers. That's where you find us.
Yeah, follow us on Instagram.
I don't know. I'm not on there.
Josh is the worst
what?
social media.
Instaface?
Yeah, I'm bad, dude.
We want to thank Josh and Christa for coming on the show. If you haven't been to the Goat Ridge Brewery, you have to check it out. They have a wide assortment of beers, non-alcoholic drinks, and awesome food from Model Citizen.
And we want to thank you for taking time out of your day to spend with us. If you enjoyed this episode, it would mean a lot to us if you would subscribe and leave a review. The On Main Street podcast is a bi-weekly show brought to you by New London Real Estate.